Hi, Year 11. This is another video about an element of Buddhist teachings called Dependent Origination, or it's sometimes called Dependent Arising. I thought I'll do a video on this because it's going to be very difficult if you miss this lesson to understand this teaching just by reading stuff, because it is quite complicated. So I thought I'd do a video to put it on the YouTube channel just in case anyone is not in for this lesson, so they can catch up basically. So yeah, I'm going to go through these slides. Best thing to do would be, if you can, either make notes from this video, or I'll put the slides on the Teams page, and if you can print off the slides, that would be even better, and you can just add notes to the slides then. There's also a worksheet and another reading that you will need, but I'll put it all on there as well. So I'm just going to go through, so we're going to begin by just talking about what dependent origination is, or dependent arising, and then there's going to be like a reading and activity to do at the end. Okay, so here's the quote that it all begins with. This is from the Pali Canon. So the Buddha said this is quite a strange quote, as you can probably see. He says, "This being, that becomes, from the arising of this, that arises. This not being, that does not become, from the cessation of this, that ceases." Cessation just means stopping, and ceases means stops. So what's the quote all about? Well, you need to know this quote, and for some Buddhists, it's seen as the most important teaching in Buddhism. It is the teaching of what they call dependent origination or dependent arising. And the whole point is, when it says this and that, it just means anything in the world or anything in the universe. What Buddhism is saying is that everything in the universe has a cause. So, for example, this being, that becomes. If one thing happens, then another thing happens. Everything has a cause, and when you stop that cause, the thing stops. So this not being, that does not become. That's what it means. Everything has a cause, and when the cause stops, the thing stops. So let's have another look. So here is the basic teaching of what that means in more simple language. It's often seen as the most important teaching in Buddhism. Put most simply, it means this: when X is, Y is. When X ends, Y ends. And it's like a mathematical equation. X and Y can be anything. So in other words, whatever causes Y, when X is there, Y exists. When X ends, Y stops existing. So in other words, everything has a cause, and when the cause disappears, so does the thing. The process of the cause and effect is the key to understanding the world and reaching complete happiness according to Buddhism. So this is not just some random fact. You know, we've said before that the Buddha said he teaches only suffering and the end of suffering. So to say that this is important means it must have something very important to do with suffering and the end of suffering. And this is the point. Buddhism says that this idea that everything has a cause, and when the cause ends, that thing ends, is kind of the most fundamental truth about the universe. And also, because it's the most fundamental truth about the universe, you need to know it in order to get to enlightenment. Now, if we take it down to the most basic teachings in Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, we can see that the Four Noble Truths are an example of how the process of dependent origination works. When there's suffering exists when there is craving. So because there is craving, there is suffering. When craving disappears, so does suffering. So you can see that's just one example of dependent origination, but it's probably the most important one for Buddhism, because it shows how there's a cause of something. If you want to get rid of that thing, get rid of the cause. Dependent origination is also linked to anicca, or impermanence, because dependent origination shows how everything in the universe depends on other things for their existence. Because they depend on other things, they are impermanent. When the things they depend on disappear, so do they. So everything in the world exists dependent on causes, and when those causes stop existing, so do they. Now you might think this is strange, right? Because if you think about it, what caused a human being? Well, it's their parents. Well, when their parents stop existing, when their parents die, they don't stop existing. But it's actually much more complicated than that. Buddhism says, well, actually, you depend on many things. For example, you depend on oxygen and air and parts of the body working in the correct way and things like that. So there's a lot of different things that cause you to exist. And when all of those things that cause you to exist, when those causes disappear, you stop existing. So everything in the world is caused by something, and because everything's caused, then one day its existence will stop because the cause will stop. Now, the 12 links of dependent origination is a way of showing how the process of cause and effect work. It is quite complicated, so I'm going to talk you through it. It's really a way of showing how this process of cause and effect keeps us trapped within samsara. If you remember, we looked at the wheel of life, and in the wheel of life, in the middle, you've got greed, hatred, and ignorance, or greed, hatred, and delusion, the three poisons. You've then got the bit of the wheel that represents karma, with good people doing good actions going up, people do bad actions going down. Next layer, you've got the 6 places of rebirth, 6 realms you can be reborn in. Then you've got the Buddha pointing the way to enlightenment, and everything like that. But right on the outside of the circle, you can see these 12 pictures, starting, if you look at the very top, to the right-hand side of the monster's face, you've got a picture of a man, and he's got an arrow in his eye. You probably can't see it very clearly, but he's got an arrow in his eye. So these 12 pictures represent 12 links, one causing the other. It's supposed to show in how dependent origination works during everyone's lives, everyone who's not enlightened, to keep them trapped in samsara. Now, those 12 links are divided into 3 lives, so it's supposed to portray a person going through 3 different lifetimes, and how the different one thing causes another, and it keeps the person trapped within samsara. Now, we should bear in mind something, and there's some various things I want you to write down when we go through the 12 links. So the next part of the slides are going to be the 12 links. So it's really good if you can write these down, the 12 links, or print them out. But even if you print them out, you need to add some notes to them. The first thing I want you to write down is that this is not, Buddhism would say that this is a simplification. The 12 links don't explain everything that happens during a person's life. It's just a kind of simplified version of the way that the different links lead to each other. Because the reason why it's a simplification is because Buddhism says actually things have many different causes, and many different causes are working at the same time. So you wouldn't be able to just say in your life, this causes this, as simple as that. Actually, there's lots of different causes working at the same time. But this just breaks it down, makes it into a series of simple causes in order to kind of get a clearer idea of what's going on. Let's go through it. It might become... So look, here's some of the pictures. You can see the person with the arrow in his eye. I don't know what that other picture is. That's the next picture, but we'll come to them. As you'll see, we're going to go through all the pictures. So let's start here. So every time we go into a different lifetime, I'm going to turn into a different colour. So it starts here. Because of ignorance, Buddhism says, which means not knowing the Four Noble Truths. In other words, not understanding that craving brings us suffering. Then we carry out actions that have karmic consequences. So all it's saying there is basically, if you don't know the Four Noble Truths, and they don't mean just you never heard of them, they mean you don't know them properly, deep down. You don't understand truly and deeply that suffering is caused by craving. Because of that ignorance of that, you're not, if you're ignorant of that, you're not going to get to enlightenment. And if you're not getting to enlightenment, then the good and bad things you do will have karmic consequences in your next life. That is shown in the picture of a potter making pots. So a person who makes pots, making pots. The idea, and you might want to add an explanation of the meaning of these pictures. The potter making pots is like, we are like the potter, because if we're not enlightened, then we're continually creating things for our next life. So the pots will be the results of our karma, either good or bad. Now, so then this life is very quick. This only mentions this life very briefly because this is the last bit and the first life. So because of these actions, because we've got these actions with karmic consequences, when we die, a new consciousness is formed. So we don't disappear from samsara. We get a new consciousness. So rebirth happens, and that is shown by a monkey in a tree. The mind or consciousness is often seen as a monkey by Buddhism because of the fact that it's always jumping around from one thing to another and never stays still. So so because we're ignorant of the Four Noble Truths, we haven't reached nirvana. Therefore, when we die, we'll get a new consciousness and be reborn. That's the first chain of consciousness. We're now on to the second life. So because of the new consciousness, we get a new body and a mind. This is shown as a boat with 4 passengers. Why a boat with 4 passengers? This represents the 5 skandhas, because You have your consciousness passes over, and then you become a human being. And a human being consists of a body, that is the boat, and then the 4 other skandhas, and that represents the 4 passengers in the boat. So this is saying, like, because you didn't reach enlightenment, you did actions which brought karmic consequences. So you have a new consciousness. So therefore, you get a new person. Next, because of the body and mind, we have the 6 senses. Now, in Buddhism, it's worth saying, Buddhism thinks we have 6 senses because Buddhism counts our mind, the thinking part of our mind, as a sense. So, we would say that we can taste things, smell things, and touch things, and all those kind of things, hear things. But Buddhism would say we can also kind of think of things and remember things. And Buddhism sees that as a sense. In the same way that you can experience things through the senses, you can experience things through the mind, through memory and through imagination, things like that. So again, it's just straightforward cause and effect. Because we've been born into a new body, we have our 6 senses. That is shown as a house with 6 windows. Nice and straightforward. It means information is coming into the house through 6 different places, 6 senses. Okay, this is when we get to thinking about the skandhas more. It comes into being in line with the skandhas. Because of our 6 senses, we have sensations which come from sense objects. So in other words, we experience stuff, so we hear stuff, we smell stuff, we taste stuff, we touch things, we hear things, whatever. And also because of the 6th sense, we remember things, we imagine things, we think of things. That is shown by 2 people kissing. So I suppose it's supposed to be an intense sensation. So that's again, all these things is inevitable. If you don't get enlightened, then you can have a new consciousness. If you can have a new consciousness, you're going to have a new body and mind. Because you've got a body and mind, you can have 6 senses. Because you've got 6 senses, we come into contact with sense objects. We have these sensations. Okay, this is still the same life. Because of sensations, we have pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feelings. So Buddhism says that everything in life, all our sensations we get are either pleasant, we like them, they're unpleasant, we don't like them, or they're neutral, we don't care about them. And this is shown by a person with an arrow in their eye. I don't know why it's shown as a person with an arrow in their eye, because that really is only an unpleasant sensation, but that's how it's shown. Person with an arrow in an eye. So again, it's nice and straightforward. Because we've got the 6 senses, we have experiences, and those experiences are we're going to experience something good, bad, or neutral. Number 7, because of feelings we experience, craving to have pleasant feelings and avoid what is unpleasant. So this is where craving comes in. When we have pleasant, with neutral we don't care, but when we have pleasant feelings we want to have more of that, and when we have unpleasant feelings we want to get rid of it and get away from it. So that's our craving to have stuff we like and not have stuff we don't like. This is shown as a person drinking alcohol. I suppose it's supposed to be linked to a craving. Some people crave to drink alcohol, so it shows craving. Next one, because of craving, we become attached to certain actions which bring us what we crave. What's this shown as? This is a person picking fruit from a tree. Quite why it's that, I'm not sure. I think it's supposed to be the idea of like our actions. It's like linked to the idea of the fruit of your actions. If you do this, it will have certain consequences for you. But this is a key point in the cycle of dependent origination, because a lot of the things we've looked at so far can't be helped. If you get reborn, you're going to have a body. You can't help that. If you've got a body and mind, then you're going to have the 6 senses. You can't help that. If you've got 6 senses, you're going to have information coming in, sensations coming in from different objects. If you're going to have different objects, sensations from different objects, then you're going to have some pleasant, some unpleasant, and neutral. You can't help that. If you have unpleasant and pleasant things, then you're going to crave what's pleasant and try to avoid what's unpleasant, and you can't help that. That's just natural. This is the bit where you can actually have some say in it, where you can actually control it. This is the bit where the cycle can be broken, because it says, look, because we crave, we become attached to certain actions that bring what we crave. In other words, we act on our cravings. We become attached to doing things that bring our cravings and avoiding things which bring what we don't like. Now the point is here is where you can break the chain. Buddhism says, if you, instead of indulging in your cravings, if you go against that by taking actions which don't mean that you're always getting what you crave, then you can start the process of getting away from your cravings. And if you get away from your cravings, you can break the cycle of dependent origination and escape from rebirth. That's the idea. So if you think about it, like link it to a Buddhist monk's life. Now, a Buddhist monk is not allowed to eat in the afternoon. They only eat one meal a day. Now, look, that Buddhist monks, when they're normal people, so they would crave to eat as much as the next person. They crave the pleasant experience of eating food. However, instead of being attached to actions which bring what they crave, instead of eating all the time that they want to eat, they don't eat in the afternoon, with the idea that they can break that cycle, so they can stop having that craving for good food, and then only eat food in order to keep themselves healthy. Now, that doesn't mean as soon as you stop doing the action that gets what you crave, you'll stop craving. But that's the first step. If you stop doing the action, then later on you'll stop the craving. When we looked at the Eightfold Path, or at the comparison with smoking. Now, the first thing someone's got to do to give up smoking is stop actually smoking cigarettes, and that's like this, right? If the person can't help that they crave the cigarettes, but they can help whether they smoke them or not. That's where they can break the chain, and they can only give up the craving if they give up the action. I hope that makes sense. Okay, we're still on this life, and as you can see, it spends a huge amount of time on the middle life. That's because it's trying to give the most detailed explanation it's trying to give is in this middle life. We'll talk about, and then it'll have some more in the next life. So because we're attached to certain actions, we'll continue to exist within samsara. So because we're still attached, because we still crave stuff, we're still in samsara. This is shown as a pregnant woman, because it's the idea that by craving stuff, we're guaranteeing that we won't escape from samsara and will be reborn. Because of continuing to exist in samsara, we are born. So here it goes, we're moving from this life into the next one. So a picture of a woman giving birth is this picture. So we continue to crave stuff, so we're not enlightened, so we get born. And then this is the next life, and then it says, because we're born, we grow old and die. Well, we know that's true. A picture of a corpse. If we grow old and die without reaching nirvana, we have ignorance, and so the chain begins again, and that's a blind person. That's ignorance, and so it goes back to the beginning. Now, why doesn't it just do all in one life? Well, the reason it does it in two lives is because actually, if you look at this, it's saying that we've got two different things that bring us suffering. We've got craving, and if we don't try and get rid of the craving, we will continue to suffer. But we've also got ignorance, and so it's trying to show in the first life and the third life they concentrate on ignorance, and on in the middle life they concentrate on craving. But the truth is the two of them are linked, right? The only way to get out of the cycle of rebirth is to stop craving, and to stop craving you need to stop your ignorance, because craving is based on an ignorance, the ignorance that what you crave will bring you happiness. You've got to understand that it won't bring you happiness, and therefore you'll get away from the craving. So in a way, there's two places you can break the chain. You can break the chain in this bit where you grow old and reach nirvana. Without reaching nirvana, you have ignorance, you grow old and die. There you can break the chain by gaining your wisdom and not being ignorant of the Four Noble Truths. Or you could break the chain at the place where it says you start acting on your cravings. But in truth, because actually it's not, these things aren't separated over lives. All these things are happening in the same life according to Buddhism. So actually that's the same thing. Trying to find out ignorance and trying to give up craving are the same. It's just two different ways of looking at that particular point. The point is, if you want to break the chain, you've got to become wise and give up your craving, and that's the way you do that is by practicing the Eightfold Path. So that's the way the 12 links of dependent origination work. I hope it makes sense. It's kind of difficult to explain. Okay, the last thing I want you to do is have a look at the reading that goes along with this, because I've put a question there. All things in the world are caused by something else. Do you agree? And I've got different, and I'm going to want this to be a worksheet, and I want you to kind of print this off and use the information on the for information sheet to fill this in. I'll just talk you through it. It says, I'm a Buddhist and I agree with the teaching of dependent arising, it should say. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha said, now you can go back to your quote. This being, that becomes, that being, this becomes, all that kind of stuff. So that's the quote you need to put in there. Now, why does that agree with the statement? Well, because basically dependent arising says everything in the world is caused by something else, and when that cause disappears, that thing will disappear. Now, I've got some other people. What would they think of it? What would an empiricist see? This is all on your sheet, but I'll just talk you through it. An empiricist is someone who believes their senses. So a modern scientific empiricist would probably agree with the Buddhist view, because the truth is that science agrees that everything is caused by something. There's nothing that exists without a cause in science. In fact, the process of cause and effect is fundamental to how science works. No one would, if you were to ask a scientist, you said, like, well, I got this chemical reaction, well, what caused it? And you said nothing caused it. Well, they would just think that was crazy. So a modern empiricist would say, look, the evidence shows that nothing that exists without a cause. Here's a Christian. Why would a Christian disagree? Well, a Christian would disagree because they believe there is one thing that has no cause, and that is God. If you think back to when we did the cosmological argument, Christians believe that one of the reasons they believe in God is because they think, well, everything is caused by something, and the universe, so therefore the universe must have been caused by something, and that cause must be God. Now, the reason they think, because of that, they think that God must have no cause. He must be the one thing that wasn't caused. He always existed. He's eternal. So Christians think that God wasn't caused. He is the cause of everything else. So Christians disagree. They would agree that most things in the world have a cause, but they'd say there's one thing that doesn't have a cause, and that is God. I've put at the bottom there a different Buddhist view. There are some Buddhists who argue that there's one thing that has no cause, and that is nirvana. Sometimes people would say Buddha nature, which is nirvana within ourselves, has no cause. So some Buddhists would say, yes, dependent origination is true because everything has a cause in samsara, but there is something outside of samsara, and that is nirvana or Buddha nature that has no cause. Just as a little end point there, you don't really know this, I suppose, but it should be worth saying that some Buddhists would disagree with that, because some Buddhists would say, actually, nirvana is not like a thing, and like some kind of God that's outside of samsara. Some Buddhists say nirvana is just a way of looking at the world, a state of mind. So they would say, well, nirvana is not a thing hasn't got a cause. Nirvana is a way of looking at the world. Okay, that's everything. Try to fill in that worksheet based on what I've said here, but also read through the reading as well. I hope that makes sense. If you've got any questions, just email me. Okay, bye.